This is Robert Merdlanchi of the MindShare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to this week in Canadian EdTech, MindShareTV, a very special edition featuring Dr. Matt Rhodes, who's been on our show in the past on his new book, Crush It from the Start, 50 Tips for Teachers. Dr. Rhodes, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Robert, for having me. Excited to talk about this with you.
Absolutely. A little bit about Dr. Rhodes. He's an innovator and expert in integrating EdTech and research-based instructional strategies to amplify student learning. He's currently an instructional leader in EdTech integration. This is for a consortium of adult schools. He spent prior years in special ed in K-12. He's also worked as a technology coach. Matt is also a lecturer in EdTech and K-12 teacher candidate supervisory, author, podcaster, and educational consultant. You're a busy man,
I am.
and a multi-author, book author as well, Matt.
Yeah, definitely busy, but it's all stuff that I really enjoy doing. So sometimes it doesn't feel like work. So that's
absolutely, and it's not your first rodeo. You've been on our podcast in the past. I've been on yours, and it's not your first book either. So kudos to you for embracing that growth mindset.
I appreciate it. I just think it's, if you like writing, it's just if you do it every day for a little bit and you can collaborate with some people on it, it definitely, you're just learning along the way and, you can produce something that hopefully people will enjoy.
Well, and, it's a very apropos topic today. So you're on point when it comes to helping new teachers adapt to the vastly different environment that we were accustomed to uh, you know uh, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, for that matter. The pandemic spurred many things in education and innovation. So talk to me about the why and some highlights. And you have a number of collaborators on this book, a lot of PhDs there.
Yeah, so it's a book about a number of us that are supervisors and coaches of new teachers throughout the country at universities, as well as within our capacities in districts or educational organizations. And we felt, as that, the last 3 years have really changed how teaching and learning looks like in classrooms. And we felt that in the United States, and I feel like in Canada as well, there's a crisis in terms of needing new teachers and training them and putting them in a position to be successful, as well as sustainable, as well as for them to enjoy what they're doing. Because really, we felt that new teachers need to be mentored, as well as pre-service teachers at the university level need to be shown kind of what are some things that they need to navigate now, especially being able to use research-based strategies with all these tech tools, maybe possibly being able to teach in multiple settings, social emotional learning, equity, setting your own boundaries, really lesson planning and workflow in kind of the modern age that we're at, using a variety of different tools, as well as really supporting students that may have a tragedy going on or mental health. So we have really essentially 50 tips, as well as 4 great in-depth conversations that outline some really difficult things that teachers may have to face, including we talked about critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching. What are those two things, and how do you navigate that conversation with a variety of different stakeholders in schools? So that was really the purpose and kind of what's in it. And we hope that, it can support mentor teaching programs, we called induction, as well as at the university. And hopefully, teachers that may have already some experience to support them and, continue to grow.
Thank you for that. You highlight one of your 29th tip on your website that I'm sharing here. I love StreamYard for what it is, and it's so versatile. I know you embrace it as well. The notion of mentorship and growth mindset is critical. There's no option on this if you want to survive a career as an educator. Talk to me about mentorship and who some of your who inspired you, and how how does a teacher go about finding the mentor? Not everyone has that
Yeah.
capacity or understanding, right, of the process.
So a lot of what the research shows is that ongoing mentorship, regardless of where you're at in your career, whether it's the beginning, middle, or end, it helps with levels of efficacy as well as being able to enjoy the career. It reduces feelings of burnout, and it also gives you just a heightened sense of agency. So the research is really strong. It's just a matter of finding mentors throughout your career. And initially, when you start, when you're going into student teaching, you're given a mentor and a supervisor generally in a variety of different programs, and those are given to you. And the goal is for them to support you along the way. Sometimes those mentors may not necessarily be the best mentors for you, but they may be. It really just depends. But really, finding mentors is to gravitate towards individuals within schools as well as the educational community that that maybe have some of the same goals as you, as well as someone that you can really truly connect with interest and maybe the time you are in life. um, and that definitely is something that can help you. Sometimes schools have those within their own organizational structures, but also I think educators themselves need to find the skills to find mentors. And for me, it was a journey because you know when I was student teaching, my mentor teachers were not necessarily whom I would call my mentor, but my supervisor with the
Right.
university turned out to be my mentor over time,
Right.
and
And
I
you
worked
have
with
to
them out.
nurture that, right? It has to be a two-way street. It just doesn't happen without an effort from both parties.
100%. And hopefully there's something that maybe you can bring at the table as a new teacher as well as a mentor. I mean, I think that as a new teacher, you can hopefully, with that mentor, you can help them with something or energize them somehow. And then as the mentor, you can maybe it's the time you feel like in your careers to give back, but also know that maybe that new teacher can give you some new ideas or areas of growth as well. So like you said, it's a two-way street.
Absolutely. How has the role of the teacher changed and accelerated in change from the pandemic? And uh, are why should people want to go into teaching
I think
as
people
a
should go into
profession?
teaching. I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think it's different for many people. But I think that if you want to be in the position to help make an impact in lives, whether that's short term or long term, I think what we need to tell a lot of new teachers and teachers in general is that the impact that you see on a day-to-day basis may not be that large, but in 5 to 10 years, that impact may ultimately be something that changes the world or changes, you know, the trajectory of a family or the trajectory of, just an individual life. And you may not see that, but you have to be patient and just see kind of the signs as you go with that student and maybe as they progress through their education. That's kind of for me at least, but I think that that's one reason. And I think also other reasons could be, if you can find a place and for yourself as well, it can be a really, sustainable career where there's a lot of change that's happening, but at the same time, though, it's a job where you can have a lot of, balance with family and be a part of the community and those type of things. But I think the nature of the profession's changed because I think teachers have to deal with a lot more than they used to, especially I think with the advent of just 24/7 communication, technology. Um, I think that there's been a politicalization of education. I think teachers are more, they have administrative roles that I think that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago. And I think sometimes, depending on where you are, there's increasingly high expectations and performance based things that they need to do. So it's a lot of things have changed, and it's created a lot of new skills that you have to continue to work on and improve, as well as um, you know for your own mental health and for your career to set boundaries in terms of what is enough, because in education, I think a lot of people get in the trap of, I'm not doing enough. And I
Right.
ultimately have to set those boundaries, and you have to have those skills to do so. So that's kind of just
What?
my thoughts of how it's
Absolutely.
changed.
Well, thank you for that, and that's a good segue to my next question around self care, teacher self care. I'm a big proponent about healthy balance between work, learning, and play. I played hockey at 7 a.m. this morning.
Nice.
I'm ready for a nap about now, but but I'm very mindful of the energy that we require to sustain and do what we do every day because we work a lot of hours. And how did you factor self care into the equation of the top 50 tips?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about this idea of emotional intelligence for adults as what we want to learn ourselves and role model for our students, because we're teaching them how to, self-regulation, setting boundaries, being able to understand how you're feeling and what your needs are at certain points. And then also, what are your boundaries and what are you going to do to set those boundaries? And we talked about various scenarios for that. And for my own life is that this is just the easy thing. I try to go to um, my circuit training class, 3 or 4 days a week. And that's a group of people that I work out with all the time, variety of different people from the community that do different things outside of education. So that's nice. That's an outlet. And also too,
Right.
is that I've kind of, after about six o'clock, I'm done. I'm not going to do anything more at that point. My evenings are going to be my sacred time, where I'm
Oh,
going to
good
be
for you.
working with, hanging out with my wife, our dogs, watching some sports on TV, or making dinner, those type of things, just keeping
Making
that open.
turkey, as in Thanksgiving, that kicks off tomorrow for you in the
Yeah,
U.S.
exactly. And
Yeah.
also to knowing that you're not going to be perfect at it, I think that that's something that you have to learn over time. You're going to have weeks where you're going to have spending more time during the days and possibly an evening, but you need to make up for that time. So maybe setting time on Friday, like right when I'm done, I'm done. I'm just going to enjoy, or I'm not going to do that much over the weekend, or not do anything over the weekend. Or we also talked about scheduling certain things that are going to be on your calendar. So regardless of what you're doing, you need to stop everything and just go do that activity. So, those are the type of things that we talked about, and we feel like that schools can offer those outlets as well. But at the same time, we also feel like individuals need to set that as well. So.
Absolutely. So, in the interest of time, why don't you share your top three tips out of the 50 that you kind of gravitate to that have served you well, um,
Yeah,
if you
definitely.
will?
So
And
I'm just looking at the table of contents right
yeah,
now, and there's certain ones that I wrote that I have bias towards, but I'm going to select three that I think that are ones that I didn't write, but things that I really gravitate towards. So I would say the first one is, building relationships that matter more than content. I think that one is one of my top tips.
okay.
Is that going into a classroom, if you don't build relationships with students, and not creating the routines, as well as um, cultivating those two together, you're not going to be successful.
I,
And
I love that one. I always said to my kids, they come home and say, the French teacher doesn't like me. And I'm like, no, you need to really work on that relationship because the more positive they feel about you, the better you will do, the more motivating it will be. So, and understanding the student and from a personalization of learning perspective, you can't treat every kid the same. Some teachers might have that mindset, but when I was coaching hockey for the last 15 years, I would identify the strengths and weaknesses of each of the kids and try to help them achieve their full potential.
that's a great segue to the second tip for mine, is seeking strength. So asset based
Hmm.
pedagogy. So looking at the students' strengths and trying to build those strengths so that they can bridge those gaps where they need to improve in. I think that's a great tip that we
Right.
discussed as well, and setting that up in the class. I think goal setting for students is really underrated strategy that
Wow.
you can just sit down with a student and using like a rubric or that type of measurement and saying like, hey, this is where you're at based on the evidence that I see, and this are your strengths. So how about we really trying to utilize those strengths to get you to here on this rubric. So I just sitting down with a student, regardless of their age, you can use a rubric that uses emojis or provides examples of what the work looks like for the student, regardless of their age, and that really helps. And we talk about
Brilliant.
that as well. Um,
Number three.
Number three is we had a critical conversation. This is a longer tip, but this is something that we felt that was really important. So, working through a tragedy on campus,
Mm,
how do you best navigate trauma in the
mm.
classroom? So, whether something catastrophic happened to a student, illness, a death,
COVID.
COVID. I mean, so many different things that come into play. And we had a conversation in this longer tip to kind of discuss how can you, for yourself navigate that as well as support students along the way. Because sometimes when a tragedy happens, I mean, sometimes you have to put your mask on before you put the mask on students or vice versa. It really just depends. So we talked about a number of different strategies of really how to navigate that, because there's a lot of collective trauma that teachers have to deal with and
Mhm.
navigate with on a daily basis. So we need to find ways to help us navigate in a positive way so that we can help our students navigate that.
Well,
So
well,
that's
this,
the third one I wanted to
yeah,
talk
thank
about.
you for that. This book is really packed with some great insight and inspiration for not only new teachers, but continuing teachers. Talk to me about the state of the minds of educators today. Could I call it post COVID? We hope. And where are they at? I mean, how do you avoid the great snapback that Dr. Steve Jordans from U of T, psychologist, talked about as a threat coming out of COVID and going back to the path of least resistance and reverting to your old ways instead of continuing to push the envelope and innovate and leverage the tools that were making an impact?
Yeah, so I saw that you interviewed Michael Fulham the other day, and he talked
Yes,
about just a positive
you're in
culture.
good company.
So I think what he talked about there in his work is creating that that positive culture, but working at it collectively as well as individually. But also, I just think people are just trying to survive at this point. I mean, people are
Hmm.
clinging to the side of their desk, and I think we really have to focus on it at the systematic level as well as the individual level. How can we go from surviving to thriving? I mean, that's kind of the big thing, and we have to work
Right.
together to do
Well said.
that.
How do we go from surviving to thriving? That just may make the quote of the week this week.
I think that's just where a lot of people are at. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been draining over the last number of years, and I
Hmm.
think that even before then, we could say that a lot of people were getting burnt out and cling on. And I think the last 3 years really just put people really the last finger on the cliff, and then
Right.
they're gonna fall off. And we saw a lot of people fall
Right.
off, and we have to
Need
get
to.
people back as well as take that finger and put multiple hands there to lift them up. And so it starts with the collectively as well as individually. So
Well, I think
hopefully we can get there.
the first positive step a teacher can make is to go out and buy your new book, Crush It from the Start: 50 Tips for New Teachers, and I would say current teachers, because it's packed with some great insights from very smart, savvy, experienced educators who really are caring and passionate about their craft and helping others. And that, to me, says it all. And kudos to you for your timing of this. It's very, very timely. And hopefully, a few of the new teachers will catch this podcast.
Yeah, hopefully so. And if you're a school leader or even a technology leader that works with schools, it's a great book to review, as it provides a an honest, raw, but also optimistic view of how we can support teachers and really put them on a path to sustainability and enjoyable careers.
With that, Dr. Matt Rhodes, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Robert, for having me on. I appreciate it.
That was Dr. Matt Rhodes, the author of his newest book, Crush It from the Start 50 Tips for Teachers. My name is Robert Merglanchi of the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare Learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.